everyone, and welcome back, or welcome to the channel. Believe it or not, I have put on over 10,000 miles in my Subaru WRX, and I've owned it for just over a year now. This year has flown by, I have to say. 2024 has been a complete blur, and that's mostly due in part to owning this car. Now, a lot of enthusiasts don't like daily driving a manual, mostly because it can get very repetitive over time, especially if you live in a city area like I do up here in Boston. But I've learned quite a bit with this car, and it has been rather beneficial being a car reviewer and car enthusiast. But in this period of ownership, I have learned to like and dislike some things about this sedan, and maybe, just maybe, I should have gone in a different direction. In today's video, we're going to go over the pros and cons for the VB generation WRX. Is this going to be a great daily driver for you? Is this going to give you the driving experience and ownership experience that you're looking for out of a car under $40,000? Well, if you're asking those questions, you've come to the right place. Now, admittedly, with my Subaru WRX, I was only going to keep this car for 6 months of ownership. I still have my Volkswagen GTI, which mainly sits in the driveway. I did take it out a couple nights ago, but that was basically it. That car has not been seeing a lot of action outside of maybe going to Watkins Glen earlier in the summer. But it's mostly because this Subaru WRX has become my latest obsession. It's the only thing I drive. I love driving manual, and that was not supposed to happen. The WRX was supposed to be my weekend car, maybe modify it, just get proficient with driving manual so I could feature more cars like this on the channel. But after 12 months, I'm still here loving what this car has to offer. Now, I don't have any real intentions of keeping this car much longer than this, mostly because I do want to move on to something sportier, maybe V8 powered, rear wheel drive with a manual. Those are all things I have to think about in the future. But currently, what I have here with the Subaru WRX is rather special, so that's why we're going to start off with those pros. And it all begins with what's found under the hood with this 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. 271 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque is why I chose this car. I wanted a car that was going to be fun to drive, that had the power, that had the torque I was looking for, because the Honda Civic Si wasn't going to deliver that. Nor was I going to find that out of a Volkswagen GLI. I didn't want to buy a GTI since I already own a Mark 7.5. And then the Elantra N, you couldn't find them last year at this time. So the WRX was really my first choice and only choice that I could go with, where I was going to get a great deal on one, but also receive everything I wanted, such as this 2.4, but also the Subaru symmetrical all-wheel drive system. While you don't get the boxer rumble for this generation, what you do have here is a powertrain that has a nice note to it. It's not going to be annoying, it's not going to be obnoxious like most 4-cylinders, especially turbo 4s in this market. However, one thing I think a lot of you are going to like is that you get a lot of mid-range torque at the top of second into third and fourth. It makes it a great backroad car and canyon carver. I will say though that it is somewhat slow in a straight line, which that's not what this car is all about. If you're looking for that, get a Ford Mustang or a muscle car. But having gone out to the back roads in Western Mass, upstate New York, and Vermont last month for a fall foliage cruise, this was a blast to drive. I had way too much fun. You've probably heard me talk about in the past that with this car, that the steering is light, the braking isn't too responsive, and that is one of my cons for this video, which is the braking. But when you are on those back roads, when you're not dealing with stop and go traffic, everything comes together perfectly for this sedan, where the braking actually is somewhat responsive. It is going to give you some feedback when you are in the corners, and the steering input is perfect for those sweeping corners. But as a daily driver though, when you are in stop and go traffic or just driving in a straight line, that's where this car can be somewhat mundane, although the 6-speed manual changes everything with this car. And I will say that I absolutely love the mechanical feel of this shifter. I do think though that the Honda Civic Si has a better shifter in this market, but if you're looking for an old school experience, you're going to find that here with the WRX. And that's one of the unique aspects for this generation WRX, is the fact that it does feel rather raw and not the most refined. And while journalists are going to maybe complain about that, and they're going to criticize the fact that Subaru has a car that isn't going to have all the bells and whistles in regards to technology and interior comfort and quality, that's perfectly fine for a car that is placating to an enthusiast-focused customer base, because even comparing this to a Honda Civic Si, Volkswagen GLI, and Elantra N, this feels like an old school JDM car, especially for the 2023 model year without the EyeSight driver assist technologies, because that does get in the way compared to my 23. I noticed that when I featured the TR, I'm like, this is just a bit too much for me. Whereas with the 23 and my WRX, this is old school. This is the way I like driving. The fact that it does feel so mechanical makes it feel like its predecessors. Maybe not necessarily in regards to its mannerisms on the roadways, because I personally believe that the VB has been aged up quite a bit to appeal to an older consumer demographic, possibly people around my age in their 30s and 40s. Another positive with this car, mostly for the 22 and 23 model years, is that pricing is not too bad. Now, unfortunately for 2024, they upped the price a bit because you get the 11.6-inch touchscreen in the base, you get the EyeSight driver assist technologies. So now you're spending like $35,000 or close to for a base, whereas I got this for $35,500 for a premium, which isn't too bad. Because when you factor in the performance, the technology, and then also all-wheel drive, this is somewhat of a unique experience in its segment. Whereas now for 2024, heading into 2025, I just don't feel as excited about this car, because with the TR, with the TS, no increase in performance. The car doesn't feel any different than what you have for a premium or limited outside the handling capabilities. So for me, I look at the newer WRXs and say, maybe I'd go in a different direction. But for 22 and 23 WRXs, great deal, especially on the used market right now. And one last positive, which is going to be an honorable mention because I'm not taking advantage of any of this, is the fact that with the WRX, you have a lot of aftermarket support. And that's what makes it very appealing for a lot of enthusiasts and people who like tuning their cars. The fact that this generation, the minute it came out, there was already stuff for the exterior, but then also tuning companies came in. It makes it a great choice, because with the Honda Civic Si, you might not feel as inclined to do so, especially with the current generation Si, what they've done to it, aging it up. It's definitely a car that you're going to have a lot more refinement and quality than you did in the past. Same goes for the GLI and the Elantra N. I think the Subaru WRX is one of the last cars in its market that you can really truly customize and personalize to your liking, just because so many manufacturers have bowed out of this segment, such as Volkswagen, where you don't have a manual for the GTI anymore. Moving on to the negatives with the Subaru WRX for this generation, and just personal things that I've kind of gotten maybe a little tired of with this car throughout my year of ownership, really all centers around the interior. Now, I know some of you are going to be saying, well, Mike, you should have known this before you bought a WRX, because this is the way these cars have always been built. If you were looking for other characteristics or qualities, you should have went in a different direction. But that's not the point with this car, because I loved what it was offering in regards to performance, and I also like the design as well. But the interior is where this car does fall a bit short, especially now in the middle 2020s. So the first thing I want to point out here is the fact that with this generation, it's not as well equipped as its rivals. And I don't just mean that in regards to technology, but also features. So I have a premium which came in at around $35,000. At $35,000 last year at this time, I could have gone with the Volkswagen GLI Autobahn Edition for around $32,000. And with that car, I would get heated and ventilated leather trim seats, power moonroof, also, of course, full digital gauge cluster. And I think Volkswagen's head units are a bit better than what we have here with Subaru, but that's beside the point. Also, when you're comparing this to, say, a Hyundai Elantra N, maybe even Honda Civic Si, at this price point, the seats might be a bit more aggressive and definitely fit the persona of what these cars are all about. Now, I knew that walking in with the premium, the cloth upholstery, but really for the Subaru WRX in general, unless you go with the GT, TR, or TS, you're not getting Recaros, so you're not even getting seats that would be beneficial if you are going to be going to the track, maybe autocross, or possibly just enjoy this car on some winding back roads. This then leads me into the technology for this generation. Now, I'm perfectly okay with the analog gauges and the small information display in the center. I'm used to owning cars with this exact same setup. In fact, I don't really care about having a full digital gauge cluster with this sedan, but within its segment, I think it actually needs it. But it's more along the lines with this 11.6-inch touchscreen, because I find it easy to use, but I will say that there's better head units in this market from Honda, from Volkswagen. I think even Hyundai has a better tech package than what we have here in the Subaru WRX. Also, another thing too is that with this screen, if you are new to what Subaru is offering, it will take some time to get used to. There is a bit of a learning curve. Also, it's not super in-depth, it's not super intuitive, which isn't too much of a surprise for a car in this market. But I would like to see Subaru integrate better tech in the future for all their vehicles, since this 11.6-inch touchscreen is standard across all models outside some base trims for some remaining vehicles in the lineup. And then for me, this is the big one with the Subaru WRX, and one of the reasons why I probably won't come back and buy one again is the fact that the best features are reserved for the TR, the TS, and the GT. You can't get adaptive dampers out of a limited or premium. You're not going to get the Recaros. You're not going to get the Brembos. And for a car at around $45,000 that's only giving you 271 horsepower, I just don't think it's worth it. And having featured the TR very recently on the channel, I was a bit disappointed, especially with the brakes. Now, handling-wise, what they did to the suspension and steering column, fantastic. That WRX handles so well, and it's very enjoyable, and those Recaros complement that new driving experience. But if you're looking for a Subaru WRX that's affordable, a car that's not going to break the bank, you're not spending close to $50,000, you're missing out on a lot here. And I'm not talking about the Harman Kardon premium audio system that you can get as an option with the premium or the power moonroof. It's everything else. It's the mechanical aspects, it's those brakes, it's the handling, the stiffer suspension, and also, of course, those Recaros. Those are the three things that I will come back to for this generation and say, you know what, Subaru is kind of letting us down in that regard. The fact that we don't get any of that for a car under $40,000, I think is a huge miss. With the Subaru WRX, with these brakes that I have, yes, they're sufficient, yes, they're fine. I've taken this car out on some winding back roads in western Massachusetts, but I would love to have that feedback. I like to have that grab with those brakes, and I just don't get that here with this car, and that's perfectly fine as a daily driver. But I think if you're looking for a sports car under $40,000, you're going to find better in this market. So my final verdict here for the Subaru WRX, having put over 10,000 miles in 1 year on the odometer, is that this car is far from perfect. There's a lot of imperfections. But for any car at around $40,000 or below, there's going to be plenty of aspects that you're not going to like, or maybe some of you will actually enjoy. As an enthusiast-focused sedan, though, it achieves everything it was designed to do. It's fun to drive, the 6-speed manual is engaging. Also, one thing I haven't talked about is the clutch. The clutch does have some decent weight to it. It's not the lightest in this market, and I'm perfectly fine with that, because having driven the Honda Civic Si and Volkswagen GLI, those clutches leave a lot more to be desired, at least for me. What I've experienced with the Subaru WRX is exactly what I want to experience in other cars in the future. Also, another thing too is that, like I talked about before, with the handling, the braking, and the suspension, it does everything well on a winding back road. In daily driving situations, not so much. This is going to be a car you're going to want to push to its limits, and it's not going to be the most enjoyable when you are just commuting to work. And I think the same could be said for a lot of cars in this market. So if you are looking for an all-wheel drive manual car, you only have a few choices: the WRX, the GR Corolla, and the Golf R. The GR Corolla, though, they're very difficult to find right now. Also, with the Volkswagen Golf R, very expensive. Whereas with the WRX, you can easily find them at any dealership. There's a wide selection of these cars on the market, both new and used, and I think it's a no-brainer. On a more personal note, though, with the WRX, it has changed my perspective on driving. It has changed my taste in cars. I am now looking for a raw experience. I'm looking for solely an enthusiast experience out of a car like this. Whereas in the past, I would say, well, maybe for my Volkswagen GTI, I'll go to an Audi S5 Sportback or a luxury car. not so much. If I'm looking for a fun daily driver, a fun car that's going to keep me engaged, it has to be raw like this. It has to be something unique, whether it is a Porsche 911 or maybe even a Ford Mustang. Those are two cars that really weren't necessarily on my list of considerations for future purchases, but they are now. So if you are someone who's never driven manual, or you're looking for a car that's going to give you something unique, take a look at the WRX, because I think it's going to be a very enjoyable experience for you. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and the pros and cons for the Subaru WRX for the VB generation. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys next time.